So today I'm going to be doing the explanation on this 8x8 door which I showed recently on my channel. I'm going to be doing this as a tutorial, but that's mostly just so I can explain things in the way that I like. I really suggest against actually building this for a couple reasons. One, because it uses some 1.11 features such as this log updater and there's some note blocks, but it doesn't use observers. I would just suggest building an observer-based door. I think there's probably some tutorials online for those because they'll be much faster and much smaller than this. But this is an observerless door because that's the category that I work in most often because I enjoy it more. And also because the top is locational and the bottom is directional. I'm currently working on a fix for the top, and I'm sure there's something I can do about the bottom as well. But because of those reasons, I wouldn't suggest it. So it only works facing in the north-south direction. This is due to the way that the tape works, and because it's on the bottom, it's probably more easily fixable because the bottom's quite a bit simpler than the top. And in order to check whether the door is going to be locational in where you're going to build it, basically you want this sort of set up, and when we power this, we want it to not retract. We want it to get stuck on the bud. We didn't really think about this too much when I was building it, but it is reliant on that. But there is a way around this. I just haven't made the fix yet. So there we go. I'm not going to show the door opening and closing now, but I'll do it at the end of the video, and I'll put a timestamp in the description somewhere so you can watch that before it gets started. The reason for that is just because it's a bit slow. Anyway, to get started on the door, so I'm assuming you know where your door is actually going to be. Mine is here. So we're going to start with the layout. Firstly, side pistons. On this side, we want to have a gap on the top, so we can have that. That acts as an updater. And then on the other side, we want them going all the way up to the top. This is the same layout as I used on the previous one, which isn't really the most efficient layout. There are much smaller ones, which are probably easier. But as I said in the showcase video, what I really wanted to do was just make this layout be layout size, which was my original goal. So that's the layout I went with. So we have a folding quadruple on the bottom with 4 storage, including the one on the floor. And the inputs for that, which I'm going to do in white wool and obsidian, are repeaters going into the back of here. Repeaters going into these blocks to power the lower of the storage pistons and the folding pistons, and then to power the other storage, as well as later in the quad, the bottom piston of the extender. One's here. Now it's most often to power the bottom pistons of the extender, we're going to use an input here, which is again just repeaters. Now for these next 2 inputs, you want a line of obsidian so that it can't push. And for one final input here, like so. And now for the top layout, which is again identical to the previous one, although one of the inputs has actually changed, so maybe not identical. Oops, I missed a piston off the top. You want a 6-2 piston extender, like so, and obviously all the way along, so we have 6 of those. Now for the storage, we have one here, one here, and then one here, Oh no, one further back. And the way we access those is in conjunction with the redstone block double extender, which is used to power the lower pistons in the 6 tuple extender. Like that. Now, for all of the inputs, we want an obsidian one here, so that this here can't push across when this is full of blocks. With dust on there. This input here buds these pistons and acts as that input to power this storage. And then this input here, and then finally the one on the top. And then on this side, these inputs here are used to control the redstone block double extender and the storage, and then this one is used just for inputting in the 6 tuple. So that there is the layout, and now I'm going to go on to the input circuit, which is in red. So we're going to want to start out with our input block. So put 3 repeaters on 3 ticks. Excuse the weird lever in this not fully up-to-date texture pack. The link to which will be in the description. So this will power most of the side pistons. Actually power the top from somewhere else. And I'm going to put a piston here. That will be for a bit later. And then here we're going to do the classic trick now of having a T-bud. On the server, the cauldrons get filled up automatically, but make sure you fill up the cauldron. Just completely full. Go up to there. Repeater on 4 ticks. Like so. That now will now act as a T-bud with a bit of a delay, but that's fine. That will power some more of the side pistons. That will power the top side piston. And that's that for that part of the input circuit. Now we also need to power the bottom with the input circuit, and that's where this comes in. So we're going to have our hopper timer. This does create a fairly long cooldown, but that's just how it is. So you want to collect some non-stackable items. So put a full stack of regular blocks, and then some shovels, and then here you want, I'm not sure if you need all of those, but I can't be bothered to work that out right now, and then 10 items there. That'll create enough delay, but also permanently keep an item in the hopper, which will be necessary for the tape. Get an output out of the comparator, and that's going to power this piston here, and this other piston is just acting as a updater because it's budded. And that's that for powering it. That creates this will create the dual edge here. So when we do that, that will give a pulse, and when we do that, it will also give a pulse. To make sure it's correct, we're also going to have dust here. This also needs to be on subtract mode, very important. And then a redstone block there. And then the way that we do the other side pistons, which is also part of the input circuit, you want to get a piston here with a redstone block going into this with a bit of sand on it. You then want to get a dropper facing up. We'll put items in that later. Going into here. Now I hope all of this is correct. This isn't the part I remember the best. Yes, this is right. And then going into that repeater. This top setup is actually quite important. I just like that because of the way that the sextuple has its updaters. That will power those ones, and this one here will power these. So when you unpower, when you do that, all of those side pistons will extend. And that's it for the input circuit. Okay, now we're going to go on to the top, because I find the top more interesting, quite frankly. And we're going to start with the closing circuits. So, well, actually, before we do that, we're going to have the redstone block double extender, because none of the circuits in the top will work without the redstone block double extender. It's pretty much the same one as before, just sort of ever so slightly tweaked. Now I'm just going to make this block cyan because I prefer it. So here we want a comparator going into this line here, which will have a redstone block attached to it. Just for the future, for the extra move circuit, I'm going to make these all droppers. So from here you want all of these to be droppers, this one facing in this direction towards the piston and this one facing upwards, and then you want hoppers going into these like so. You can have that one just as a regular white block. These are to power the subsequent sextuple extenders as part of the extra move circuit. So then what we want to have is a big block there. I'm going to have a 2-tick repeater going into a block like so, and then you want to have a 1-tick repeater there, a 4-tick repeater there, and a 3-tick repeater there. And then basically this here is your input, but we need some updaters before we can do that. So just take this down, have a regular piston here, and in some locations, but it seems to be incredibly rare, you can have these rails, but it's usually, from my experience, it's so locational that I normally just have a piston and then a note block above it. And then this will work. He says hopefully that will extend, and that retracts, and then we can power this with like 2 ticks. It'll do that. Or we can power it with 1 tick, and it will do that, which is what we want. Those are all the different functions of this circuit. We in the last door we did it with a repeater here as our input rather than that comparator, and it's functionally exactly the same. Because whenever this gets powered from elsewhere, this signal can't go through because there's this redstone block blocking it from the side, which they added in 1.9, I think. Much to a lot of people's dismay, but it can be quite useful sometimes. And the reason we do that is simply because I just happen to need a block to go there. So now we can do the orange, which is the closing. So you want to have a piston here, which is going to have that on top of it. That's why we have this piston, because it will update this bud, pushing it up. You then want to get a cauldron, which is for a bit later, and then another redstone block, and then this will have a piston all the way up here just to push it back down again. So you want to have this with a repeater. This will just push it down again. So this is for the first move of the closing, where we want to push these across. But we need an updater, and the updater I chose for this is rather special, and that is to have a log. I don't even know where they are in the inventory. Here they are. I personally like to use jungle, but it can be any type of log and any type of leaf. Come on, give me the right ones. They all look the same. And so this is a special kind of updater which they added, I think, in 1.11. And basically, whenever you move a log next to a leaf, it will update things next to it. And you can actually chain these like so. And you see that was a bit later because every leaf you add adds 1 game tick of delay, which means that this is 1 game tick before it powers because there's only 1 leaf. And because we're powering this with a 1 tick pulse, because this pushes back down again, by the time that 1 game tick is gone, this top is still powered because a 1 redstone tick is 2 game ticks long, meaning this will power. And then we want to push that block down. So here we're going to have a piston facing downwards with a block of sand on it, or concrete powder, same thing. And the way we power that is just with a 3 tick repeater there, which will turn on and power this, pushing it down. Next we want to push blocks across from here, and we do that by sending 1 ticks through. So you want to get a slab here and then a couple blocks with 2 repeaters. So when I power this, or when I update this rather, you see that's done that. And what I noticed, or what me and Johnny noticed when we were building this, is that we pretty much want exactly the same thing again, just without powering this storage. You know, you want to push them down and you want another pulse into here. And that's another great thing about this updater, is because now this log has been 1 tick down, the next time you send a 1 tick through this, there's not going to be an update because there's no log moving next to this leaf within 1 game tick of delay. It has to retract all the way up, by which time this has to have been turned off, meaning this update acts as a toggle, meaning that when we next power this, that storage won't power, but instead we get those extra pulses, and all of the closing blocks are being moved in, and we just need to push them down again. So to get that second update, we just do this, and that piston pushing up will give us the second update, which is quite nice. So that's the entirety of the closing circuit. All that we have left is to actually push the blocks down, which is the job of a different circuit, which is the double extender circuit. Go figure. Which is in yellow. We might as well build that straight away. This is another circuit which is incredibly important in this door. This circuit is what the whole door is actually based on. So it's got a couple of what seem to be at this point extra sort of redundant moves. So change this to a slab so that this dust can go down. To block this off, I'm just going to use a green block because that's the colour that it will be later. And so we power this here with this, and then this will just lock it on so it takes a bit longer to turn off. Now to power the lower piston, we're going to have a block going down like so. That's budded, so to update it we just want to have a regular piston there. Now we're going to get our output with a hopper and a dropper. We'll see why that is later. And you need to completely fill this. You can use non-stackable items. Then you want to get your output out here, which is going to go into there. So now that will do the extension. And that's about it. Just before we continue, before I forget, just add this updater here, and also this updater here. Those are quite important, very important. Okay, so to get our next pull down, because you know it's one of these weird doubles which actually works through 3 pistons rather than through 2. So we get our first retraction using, oops, not cake, that would be really nice if it was a cake, but no, cauldron. Comparator 3 tick. So when this is extended, the cauldron will retract, but the side of the comparator is being blocked from here, and then it will give a quick signal there when it turns off, and that will pull that up. It doesn't matter that it's stuck like this, because when we power the next move, it's actually going to it'll update because the dust updates it. Now the way we get the move is a bit weird, but it'll make sense later. So you want to get this going up here, comparator on subtract mode. That's why we need this completely full with items. And then we're going to want our first complicated hopper dropper system with minecarts. You're going to have to get used to placing minecarts on this. There's a lot of really annoying minecarts, but that's just how this door goes. All my standards for annoying minecarts disappeared in the production of this door. So you want 2 droppers going up like that. You want this will be fed back into with a hopper. I'm just going to put the first of the minecarts down now. So that will go down like so. You can replace this 2 tick, although eventually that will actually be on other hoppers and droppers. Then you want this going into there. Now we're going to want another minecart. Oops, I always do that. No, that one. Yes. In between these 2 blocks. You might think that's identical to having this, but it actually, in this case, adds some delay. And if you have it going straight in, then it doesn't work. This move won't function. And so what this is going to do, you can see, is power back into there. So when we put an item in the hopper, it'll do the full retraction. Now you want to get this up here. You might think it's fully retracted, and it is, but we want another move which is just a pulse, a 2 tick pulse to this, and that's for when we use this later on in the door for parts of the sextuple. It means we don't have to squeeze this 2 tick into other circuits and time it with this. It's just already in the double extender. So you want a block of sand in there. So that will extend, and I'll do that. And so when I put a set of pistons in there, that'll extend, and it will pull up. If this wasn't a minecart, you'd actually end up with the pistons in this position. It wouldn't quite make it. So yeah, that's quite cool. And this also will power, this dust will power this dropper. An item will go out, and at certain points in the door that stops this clocking. Because when there's no item, when there's just one item missing like that, this signal here will be 14, meaning this doesn't turn off, meaning there can't ever be a clock. At some points it doesn't matter, but at some points it's quite important. So that's the double extender, and we just need to power it from the closing, and we do that through a 4 tick there, going into 2 torches, and a sticky piston. There's no sticky pistons anywhere. Here we go. With 2 sand on top of it, and then place another piston here. This is for later, but it's important. And then get a fence, and we're going to push this up with armor stands. So you want to get 1, and you actually want to get a second one stacked on top of it. This will be really important for later for the sextuple, but for now just push it over. So this means that it can be pushed up from here and be pushed up from there because it's in the middle of the two blocks. You then want to get a slab here, and then I make this cyan out of preference, and you just want to push these blocks down because you can't place them because of the hitbox of the arm stand. Then here you want to place a gold weighted pressure plate, a dust, and then a 2-tick repeater. Okay, so now if I get everything in the right position, and power it, it'll push all the way down, and that's the top closing done. When we start opening it, what's going to happen is that's all going to power again because it's based off buds. So this will update it, and then this will update it. But because it's all extended, nothing's going to break. It just looks a bit weird and sounds a bit weird. Like so. And then with a bit of delay, that will fully retract up. Although, because of the way that the extra moves works, which will be the next circuit that we're going to build, it's not going to store that block from the double extender. We're going to go straight into the sextuple extender. And that was actually accidental, but we'll get into that later. So next we're going to do the extra moves. To the green circuit. This one's a bit annoying, I'm not going to lie. So we're going to start off with this side, which is how we power the green circuit, and then the other side is the stuff which actually does stuff. So we're going to start off with something really, really annoying. We want to get from this dropper to this hopper easily, and to make it worse, we also have these. So we're going to have some minecart trickery going along here. So firstly you want to get a rail and just do that. That'll go in the middle of the two blocks. Then you want to get a fence here and then push it along. Oops. Like so. Now that's in the correct position. The main thing that's annoying about this is it makes placing these pistons on this row really annoying. So what I'm actually going to use for the most of this is world edit, for just because I'm going to be showing off stuff and so on. But you can absolutely get it to be in, get that piston correctly without world edit. All you have to do is go up here, one where you place a redstone block or something not next to a piece of dust, and retract it, and then it will be in the correct place. You also might want to do that for this one because we just broke this piston. So push that up there and it will be in the right place. Now we power that dropper as well as these droppers here using another little setup like so, with one green block in it. So because this is a low signal strength, it doesn't matter that it's powering this line, it'll just power these three droppers here. So this one will only power occasionally because it's budded and it only occasionally gets updated. And then it'll power these two here. This is basically to send the item through, but only like this here is going to be the output, but we only want it to reach the output at the end of each sextuple extender, and so we have it go through all of these little stages. It has to sit a while in this dropper, then it has to sit a while in this dropper, and then this one, so it doesn't power the next sextuple too early, which was a big problem I had. This took a long time to come to, which is why this minecart's really annoying and stuff, because that was just one of those points where my standards just dropped because I didn't care anymore. And then to get it from here to here, we again just want to have a minecart in the middle of these 4 blocks. So firstly, fence here, just push it along, and then fence is there, and push it along, And there you go, it's in the correct spot. I'm also just going to push this block down so I don't forget about it later. Like that. So that'll send the item through at the correct time. Now we need to actually just do the work with it. So firstly you want to get your output here. And then this will come into a falling edge, which is sand based. We're going to get our outputs via this hopper dropper. And the reason we have that is so that when I get this, sorry, I was just checking something, and then I place a torch here, that this torch will power this dropper, sending items into here, which was locked during the closing, and that acts as a counter which will make sure we only get 3 sextuples happening. So during the closing, or this hopper will become unpowered and all the items will go into here, and then during the opening, each sextuple that powers will send an item into there. Then we take our outputs here. So what we need to do at this point is pull our blocks up from the ceiling and then put them in storage and then start the next sextuple extender. So first let's pull the blocks upwards, and we do that like where did my repeater go? This, and that's why we use non-stackable items here, so that it reaches the 2 signal strength here to reach that repeater. That'll pull the blocks up. Then to put them in storage, I'm just going to power this. You should keep this powered for the most part when building, just so it doesn't pulse randomly. You want to get a dust under here, and then a 2-tick repeater going into a dust. So this will send a 2-tick into here. Now what's interesting is that this is designed to give 1-ticks, this kind of setup. So when we give it a 2-tick, all of these blocks are going to go up, but they're not going to be able to push back down, because by the time this piston is powered by this repeater, this bottom piston is still extended because it's got a longer pulse. And so we need it to push down, but we need it to be a 2-tick, so that we send a 2-tick through those repeaters into here, because that's the way that we retract blocks. When we've got a block here, if we want to retract it into the redstone block double extender storage, we give it a 2-tick. And so we need to send a 2-tick up here. And so just to update it so it gets pushed down again, we get a comparator going into, well, it will later be a dropper, so we might as well make it a dropper now. And then there's a dust here. Now this dust here will power and update the piston. There's actually going to be a block here, so it will also power it, but it's mostly for the update. And what's nice about this is most of the time when we send this 1-tick up here, just by updating this will create a 1-tick going through a repeater, meaning it won't go through the comparator. So now what we have is we have a signal all the way up here that only powers from the extra moves but not from the closing, which is how we get our output to power the super extenders, which we do off some droppers and hoppers naturally. So we want to have a system of hoppers here. This here you want to be a dropper. Most of these can be droppers, but it's just so much easier to place if you make them hoppers. Dropper there, and then a dropper there, and then a hopper facing into that hopper. So this is now just a little loop. We can just replace everything that was here, remembering especially the torch. So So the item will be in that bottom dropper, and just throughout the 6 tuple all these other droppers will get powered, so it will make its way back. Remembering as well to make this into a slab. So this item will come up from here, but for now I'm not going to keep it in there, just for later. Up here into that dust and into these 4 ticks, which is the input to the 6 tuple. Now, the other thing I wanted to address was about how we power the first 6 tuple, because this doesn't, and we know with this here, this system doesn't get touched at all in the closing area or the beginning. That's not how we power the first 6 tuple. The way it works is actually a very odd quirk of Redstone that I had not encountered before. I'll remember to put your update here back again, by the way. And that's that you'll see that this dropper, the home dropper for the extra move circuit, is being budded by this dropper, the redstone dust on this dropper. That's usually not a problem. It simply doesn't get updated. So it doesn't matter that it's budded. But during the closing, I just power it. It's going to break, but it doesn't matter. This here is powered and giving a long bud. This hasn't been updated yet. And when I was building this, or me and Johnny were building this, we didn't see anything that would update this. If you look around, that comparator there doesn't update it. None of these repeaters update it. Nothing should update it. And yet, it was getting updated. And that's when we found this really interesting little thing. And that is that when you have this comparator and you send a repeater 1 tick through, it doesn't power. It's a well-known fact. But it does send an update through it. And that's what was causing our 6 tuple to power early. But we didn't really see that as too much of a problem. Actually, it was quite nice. Although it makes it a lot slower to have 4 6 tuples rather than 3, it's really easy to program in. All you have to do is just put an extra item in the counter. So that wasn't a problem at all. And it just meant we didn't have to try and store the block from the double and power the extra moves an additional time from somewhere else, because this gets really packed, this door. And to have this power automatically without us even thinking about it, even if it makes the door quite a bit slower, it was quite nice in a way, but it's very peculiar. One other problem with that though is that because this dropper never gets updated from anywhere else, and when it does get updated is being constantly powered, it actually stays budded. And this was one of the first big problems I found, is that when I would then power the first instance of the extra moves after the first 6 tuple had fully retracted, this dropper didn't respond to its pulse from the comparator powering from this 2 tick down here, because it was still budded on from before. And so to address that, I just had to change some things, and we use this later, but this moving here will update the dropper, but it won't update it while this is turned on. It will only update it while it's turned off, just to clear its poweredness. So yeah, this is a really small circuit, but it reuses parts of the closing, and it uses some peculiar mechanics to work, and so it's quite an interesting circuit. Now we're finally going to go on to the 6 tuple extender, which you can see we have all of this space for. It was still quite difficult though. Okay, now we're going to go on to the science circuit, which is the 6 tuple extension. So this is our input, so we've already got that. Now we're going to take a signal across with a comparator and a 4 tick. That's going to go into here. Now what we want to do is make this like a pulse. This needs a very specific pulse length, and it's a very long pulse. We're going to add a pulse extender in a minute. But for now what we want is, this needs to be on a note block for later. This note block was added to change something which was locational. If you look on one of the older versions of the door, it doesn't actually use the note block, but it's more locational. And that furnace is for later as well. Actually, we can just remove that because we'll need to remove something else in the meantime. But yes, comparator, and then a furnace, if I can place it there. So that'll create a 2-tick pulse, but we're then going to lengthen it. So first, this pulse is actually too early for the first 6-tuple extender because there's various stuff to do with the closing happening. So we need to extend it, and the way we do that is simply by having this, and that will just power it again, but it won't form a clock, so it's fine. But this line also needs a really long pulse, and we do that with a classic comparator pulse extender, like that. Although actually this needs to be on a dropper hopper. So next what we're going to do is, one of the nice properties of the yellow double extender is when you give it a 2-tick pulse, it will actually spit the block out at the bottom. That's one of the main reasons why we made this, like how it is. And that means we can actually use the double extender for like parts of the extension as well as parts of the retraction. So in here you want to get, it wants to be a non-stackable item. So to get that 2-tick pulse, we're going to get a signal from here, a signal from here, and one into there, and put that on subtract mode, because that this in the hopper will create a signal strength of 3, that in the cauldron will create a signal strength of 3, and so that will turn off. So this will make, I think it's either a 1-tick or a 2-tick, but if it's a 1-tick, then this 2-tick will make it into a 2-tick. And that cauldron will be there while this is happening, so it'll always work. But as I said before, that cauldron, originally that was just a furnace, but it needs to be a cauldron to update this dropper. So one of the things with this, with the way that this pulse extender works, is that it will slowly be decreasing the pulse length, the signal strength. But because this whole line is budded, it won't realise. But the last one to turn off is this one here, right in front of it. The problem with that is it will actually leave this updater here budded, because this one right above it will turn off while this one's still on, so it will still be powered because it's budded. But then when this one turns off, there will be nothing to update it. So to make sure the line actually updates, we add this. So this will turn off. This will get, when this is extended, this comparator turning off will update it so the whole line can depower. So when I power this with a 4-tick, which is the pulse length we need, we're going to get, the pistons we're going to start from earlier. That's fine. I don't even know we have enough. 1, 2, no, all our pistons. So this is where I'm just going to use World Edit to fix all the pistons so that I don't have to go through that, like so. But of course you can place those manually as well. And why is it doing that? Oh, of course, these all have to be on 3 ticks. Something else. You need to have your updater connected. There we go. And that will fully extend down there and then retract up again. So next what we want to have is this double extender push across, down and up, and then give these here a 1-tick. So the way we're going to power that is a bit odd. So you want a comparator here. That's going to bud this dropper. The way we update it is with this piston, which is in turn budded and updated by that note block. The reason we do it like that is because we can't have any signal coming down, because this would update the pistons early from this pulse extender thing, which would break it. So we need to have it like this, and this here will face back into here. We need some delay, so we're just going to place some hoppers. I think it goes all the way out to here, but I'm just going to go and check that. It doesn't actually. It only goes to here. So that will get the signal, the item will come out of here and go into this dropper, and will power your redstone block double extender. We then need to unpower it. So, well, first we need to power the double extender to push it down. The reason we connected a double extender is so that we can just use this exactly the same circuit in the when we're trying to power the pistons at this level. What we basically do is make it so whenever we power the redstone block double extender fully, we then power the double extender afterwards, and we get our pulse from over here. So what's going to happen is once we place a slab here, whenever we power this, the double extender will power, and then we need to unpower that. That will retract and then retract it like so. And this won't be a problem because of the context and stuff. So the way we make it power is if you get a dropper and hopper here, these two dust will go along and put the item back, and also power this dropper through a bud so it doesn't repower. And this is why we have two armor stands here, so that the signal strength will reach through a gold pressure plate. And the reason we use a gold pressure plate is because it turns off a little bit faster than a wooden pressure plate. It's not much, but it does increase the speed of the door by, I think, a couple seconds once you account for the fact that it has to, we power this quite a few times. I think it's 4 times per 62, which is 16 times. So it's quite a good compromise. And so now when we power this, it'll push down and then back up again. And to make it push down automatically, we're going to have this. So when when this turns back off again, so this will push up, and then when it pulls back down again, this will turn on, will give us a signal through that monostable, and we go through 2 4-ticks, and that will be it. So when we put an item in here, it'll do that, and you see from this updater it 1-ticked these pistons. That's really important. So now when we do this like so, and we power this, oh, why didn't that work? Oh, because I didn't have this in place. This has to be on a slab. You'll see this actually doesn't do the right thing, and the reason for that is that this updater is here, so that when we put a thing there, it powers. Now that's useful for part of the retraction, but the extension, what we want is to have this extended so that when we push this here, it doesn't realise, these pistons don't realise, so it will only power once we push it down. And so the way we're going to do that is we're going to 1-tick this line with the obsidian, basically just putting the updater in the correct place. And that's another weird hopper dropper system that we're going to do that with, because we also need a bunch of delay. So we're going to place droppers like so. Just get rid of all of this. So you're going to have hoppers going along like this, and get yourself a dropper facing into that, and then hoppers facing down into that dropper and back along. This goes, how does this go? Yes, that's it. So you want to have this as a hopper going along there, and then a dropper facing downwards. Just remove those temporarily, and then a dropper there. So the reason this is quite complicated is that the first time we power the circuit, we want that extra 1 tick. The second time we don't, and then for the third time, when during the retraction, again, we don't want it. So what's going to happen is we're going to have an item in there. This will go, when we send the pulse, it will go through here. We'll get our output out of this hopper here, and the item will be in here. Then later, for the repowering of the extension circuit, this item will go all the way over to here, and then for the retraction, we give a 2 tick. Now the 2 tick can either put the item from here to here, which is fine, it doesn't power, or it can go from here to here, which again is fine, it doesn't matter. But in some locations, the item has to be up here for this to work at the right timing. But what's quite nice is that if the item is put here, this dust here will push it up into the correct dropper regardless of the locational properties of the dust and droppers here, which is quite nice. So the way we then going to get that 1 tick down is through here. We're going to get a sand block going into a 1 tick repeater there, and just for now, actually no, let's just do it properly. We're going to want a weird dropper system, but let's first just see that in action. This can be a bit finicky sometimes, but it does always end up working. Sometimes it won't work straight away because it's reliant on these items all being in the correct place and so on, but I think they usually end up being in the correct place just from the door working. So we'll see if it works, but if it doesn't, it's not the biggest deal in the world. See, I don't even know what happened there. Oh, it's also quite important that we have a dust there, because this is a bud, but it only gets updated when this comparator is turned on and off by this dust here. Now I have to try and fix all of this. And it's that I was actually building the wrong version, because the one I'm more familiar with is this version, which is more locational. There's a little circuit in here which is locational, and I fixed that on this version, but there's a couple of areas there which are a little bit different. Most notably this, we do actually have that extra hopper, but it functions in exactly the same way. And then here, this is once again identical. It doesn't actually need to have the monostable, but it's the same little bit there. And there you go. And so now when I fix this all up and I make these all correct, power this. See, that gave a 1 tick, and it's done the correct thing, and it's 1 tick those out. Nice. So next what we want to do is we want to power the double extender, the yellow double extender again, to pull these blocks up. Now one of the annoying things about this is we actually want to power it with a 5-tick pulse, and anyone who does redstone knows just how annoying 5-tick pulses are, but we managed to work it out. So firstly, we're going to get the signal off this falling edge, and we do that from here. And we want to get a signal into, well, we want to get the item into here, and this is where we're going to use some more annoying minecart tricks. So sorry. Firstly, you want to clip this minecart into that furnace, because you can't do that in any other way. Next, what you want to do is place a slab on the lower half of this block, and then a piston there. You want to then push it up. That is so that we can then push this push the minecart across while it's also going on top of this repeater and the comparator that is on that hopper. So it goes there, and then it's in the middle of the 4 blocks and inside of that furnace, which is a little obnoxious, but is actually not that bad, quite frankly. So if we furnace back, comparator there. Trust me, the minecarts do get worse. So we do that, and then that's just a return, so that's fine. And then you can put this back here. So what we do here is get this comparator, and this will go into this little hopper loop little thingy. This is just 4 droppers all facing into each other. Now, because of the way that droppers power, when the item's in here, it's going to power this one, then power this one after, so it's going to skip this dropper and go straight to here, which means we can get our output through there to power the double extender. And then what we're going to do is get a signal from this hopper. After having had some delay, we end up getting a 5-tick pulse or something like that, and that'll go push the item back into here. But then the next time we power this whole circuit, that's when we're powering these pistons here at this point. And after that, we don't want to power the double again, so this also acts as a toggle, putting the item from this dropper into here, and it won't skip and go and power this. And then we have 2 comparators, one to get the output from here and one to power this without powering this again, because this would end up updating stuff and pushing the armor stand up again, breaking it. So that's why there's 2 comparators in a row though. So that will pull the things up, that will pull these pistons up to here, but then we want to attract them further because we still can't push these blocks over, the redstone blocks. And so now what we want is a little system to pull them up, and here we want some delay, so we're going to do it with a little hopper clock here. You want to have 9 items, no, I think it's 7 items actually, and then a shovel. I'm just going to go check that. Yeah, it is 7. And that will go into this comparator, which will go into a monostable. Now we power this, which does the first retraction, and then we want to give a double pulse to the next input. So we do the first of those 2 pulses with a 4-tick here, and we do the second one with a fairly complicated little dropper system in here to fill up this final bit of space. Now it's a bit specific because we want it, well, there's a few properties of it. I'll build it first and explain. So we want it going into here. We're going to get a dropper there, one facing downwards there, so that's going to go into here. And then we're going to want 2, we're going to want a dropper facing that direction, and then if you can find a way of placing them, 2 hoppers like that. complete the loop. And then 2 items in here. Now this is, and then an updater here. Okay, I think that's correct. We actually also want, that wasn't what I wanted. You then want to place a dust here. So the way this works is quite nice. So the first time we ever power in the 6-tuple, the first time we power this line, we don't want to get an output because there'll be some other droppers and some other droppers here which we don't want to power. If they do power, what's going to happen is it's going to push the redstone blocks over and down as if it's going to power these pistons at this level, but like really too early. So we can't have a power the first time. And the way we get around that is having 2 items in here and none in here. Well, what's going to happen is because this is a dust, this one will power first, this first dropper here, but then this piston will act as an updater for the other one. But a piston adds 1 update of delay, meaning this dropper will always power second. So no, we won't get a pulse that time. And then that thing will turn off, and just in case you think it's a problem, this block here can never permanently bud this, because we also have this piston here which will update that on the falling edge. I don't know if that made sense. But then pretty much every other time we do want it to give a pulse. Like at this point, when we give this the 1 tick, we want to have those little hoppers of delay going into here, powering, giving the second pulse of the double pulse for the retraction. But the reason we have 2 items is when we're doing the final retraction, which will be the purple circuit, we actually want a really long pulse as that double pulse thing here. That's just so we have time to have a pulse lower down to collect some blocks. It'll make more sense when there's some context behind it, but basically this line here will get a double pulse, sending both items through, giving us a longer pulse into there, and that's just the gist of how that drop-hopper system works. And that goes through, I think, a 1-tick repeater. I've got caps lock on. Yes, a 1-tick repeater. And then, of course, place your 4 again. So, when all of these items are in the correct space, we can give that whole thing a try. Yeah. Oh, what happened there? That was interesting. Oh, okay, no, I do understand that. So what we want is this here with an item in it. What was happening is the delay wasn't correct because we need it so that all of the items have to go in, and when the last item, that shovel, comes in, that's when it turns on. But when this isn't being subtracted, that can't happen. So I'm just going to reset everything. These just need to be a bit higher, else they're going to do a weird thing. And that will do that for 1 tick. This will then push down, pull up, get the that there, and then it'll fully retract. Now we're ready to push the redstone blocks down again. And we do that, of course, with yet more hoppers and droppers. So just remove those for a sec. That's fine if you touch that. So when that pulse comes in to power that 1-tick repeater, it's also going to power this dropper, sending an item through there, powering this dropper again. So we have to go through all these hoppers, so there'll be some delay, but that's going to repower it and give a really long pulse into the hopper dropper. Sorry, into the redstone block double extender, which is just what we want. So that's going to power it. But then the second time when we repower it, we don't want a long pulse, you want a short pulse. So if we picture them here, we want to send a 4 tick into here, because what's going to happen is these are going to go across, power the pistons, but then it's going to retract really quickly, like so. But because the redstone block double extender and the yellow double extender are linked by this little dropper thing here, the yellow double extender is still going to power and pull the blocks up further. And so that's how we get that little thing in there. And so to give that short pulse, we want to have a 4 tick repeater there, a comparator here, and this is going to go down. Well, I'm going to want this, like so. I like them facing downwards, but it doesn't matter. Into there. Now you can replace everything that you broke. Comparator on subtract mode, normal comparator, dust there, and this will just go over, so it'll power this dropper here, so it can go down. Now there's one other dropper system I'm just gonna deal with before we build too much stuff and it becomes impossible, and that is this annoying little thing here. So this is a dropper system that's going to be very useful in the retraction circuit, but it involves having a hopper clipped into that, a minecart clipped into that hopper. So first you just want to get any old minecart and send it into that hopper, and then you want to get a slab on the lower half of the block there and just let it fall. That's just to create something for our other minecart to rest on. So when we do this and we get our, this joins to here, but that's fine. You want to get a minecart chest and do that, and that's going to sit on top of the other minecart. Then what you want to do is get a soul sand block and push this up. And now you see that it's fully clipped into that hopper. The items can go through, so when I place a hopper facing that direction and we place that minecart there, it'll end up in that one there. So it's really cool, it's just a bit annoying to place. And then we'll also later have this piston here. This is going to have a bit of sand on it, but it's going to be pushing upwards so that the minecart doesn't get pushed up as well. Just place a cobweb on that hopper there, and that will stop the minecart being pushed upwards. Now I just want to replace that hopper. So that's nearly the entirety of the extension circuit. We still have one more thing to do, and that is to update the pistons at the lowest point. So we're going to get an output from the double extender here. We're going to go down into a 3 tick repeater. Give me a repeater, please. A dust, and then a 4 tick repeater. Normally I like them to have the other way around, but this actually needs to be on 3 then 4 to stop some weird update happening. Just place a block there, and then a 3 tick repeater here. That's going to power these droppers like so. The item is in this one, and this goes down. This will give an update to the pistons, and then also just for part of the retraction later, we're going to have it go into a 4 tick there. And that's for one of the later moves, and that will go up. One more thing to do in the science circuit, and that's that every second time we power the long pulse with the double piston extender, we don't want this hopper thing powering here. In the same way that we have a toggle for the double extender here, we only want it to power every other time. We only want this to power every other time. And quite frankly, this is one of the parts about this door which I don't like, because it's all a bit sloppy. And I thought this, quite frankly, I thought this door would be a lot easier than it was, and which was a mistake on my part. And yeah, I ended up with some fairly sloppy redstone like this, but it functions, so that's all I need. So we're going to want to basically disable this, and we do that by making this a sand pillar, and so we can remove this block, which means that even though this torch will turn off, the items won't gather in this hopper, they'll just be going back and forth. So we want update piston here, which will update this, place a sand block or concrete powder there, and power the block there with a furnace, and then this will go up like so. Okay, so I think we should hopefully be able to do a test of the top. So we want to make sure all of these are in the correct place. That's all correct. Make sure both of these items are here. And that should be everything. Also want, did I put anything in there? Yeah, we also want an item in that one, I think. Well, let's just give it a try. Gives our one tick there. So we'll push down and up. We'll pull the box up, and there it didn't work for some reason. But then that did push the box down. So once you've done all of that and you've replaced the rail, as I forgot, you can power it again, and you'll... Okay, so after we've replaced all of the items in the droppers and made sure we have this rail back in place, we can power it again. I think there was one item I forgot to put in the dropper again. Yeah, I did actually forget this one, which is really annoying, but I've already failed at this a few times, so I'm not going to do it all again. I'm just going to power that. And it's going to push this down and give us the update. Thank the Lord. And that there is the end of the cyan circuit, and we're going to go on to the purple circuit. Okay, so that's the extension, and then let's go on to the retraction. So first what we want to see is just how much of the retraction we already have, because we see we don't really have that much room in here. So let's just see just how much space we have to actually fill. Okay, so that's the first retraction. And you see, we already get the vast majority of the retraction as well, just stored within this extension circuit. So there isn't that much left to do in terms of retraction. So the first thing that we want to do is actually repower the extension circuit, like I just did, but obviously automatically. So that from here we're going to get a signal off here. This here powers twice every time the cyan circuit powers, every second time we want the whole circuit to be refired. And we do that by basically getting a toggle off this. So I'm actually going to go under the floor here, which is pretty crazy. We're going to get ourselves a cauldron coming down. This is just going to be a falling edge. But because this will get one ticked, this is a toggle. So then you want to get an output coming up with a torch going into here, here, and here. We're also going to place one here. This one is purely to activate the side pistons. All these activate the side pistons up here, but we need to have this one as well. This is because this thing on the bottom was also going to power and spam the side pistons a little bit, and if we don't have this, the side pistons are going to finish in the wrong state, these ones here at the bottom, and they will be out. So we can't have that, obviously, so we have to intentionally spam them more so that they end up in the correct state at the end. Now this is going to go up here. I'm going to put a bunch of purple sand up here. So we want to get an output from here, where we do this by getting a furnace here with an item in it. Get an output out of that going into here, and then a torch coming up. You can put this back in the original dropper there, and this goes into here. So when this first powers, after the first use of the cyan circuit, all this sand here is going to fall, and this will create quite a long pulse because each sand takes a few ticks to reach down to the next block, which means this comparator is going to be off for 3 or 4 ticks. That means that it can repower the whole circuit, because remember, we power this with a 4 tick. That's how we input the sextuple extender from this side. That's just the input. But then once this is pulled down and we push it back up again, this is only going to be turned off for 1 tick, and then it's going to go up. This is going to 1 tick this torch, and it's going to go through the repeater, and then because it's a repeater 1 tick, it's not going to go through this comparator, which is how we just power this top input and we don't power the whole of the sextuple extender. So now what we want to do is to give a double pulse up to this line, and that, along with some of the sextuple stuff we already have, like this repeater and this hopper chain in here, will do the rest of the retraction for us. And the way we get that double pulse is from this thing we placed earlier. So this acts as a toggle here, and the second time it powers, when we get the 1 tick from here, the item is going to come out of the dropper and go through. The extra hopper is just for a bit of delay. So we're going to get an output through here. Now this is a bit annoying to place because of how I built things, but the way to do this is to get a ladder here and then place it on there. So you see the comparator's facing the correct direction. And then go down here and just block that off. So that there is going to create a 1 tick. And then what we do is we can send this 1 tick up here. So what's going to happen is this 1 tick is going to go straight through there into the repeater, giving us a pulse. But then what's also going to happen is, because it's a torch 1 tick, it's going to turn off this comparator because it's this small signal strength coming through the back, but 15 here. And then a couple ticks later, this it'll turn back on, and we'll get a second pulse fast enough to do the fast enough to do, oh for goodness sake, fast enough to do that. And then most of the other bits of retraction are already done, because this is also, this pulse here is also going to go down into this dropper circuit, powering this 4 tick which we put here earlier, doing one of the final moves. So now if I just I'm just disabling it so it doesn't power, so I can show you what happens. It's going to go up there, and so you're going to have one item, both items in there. That's correct. It'll be like that. And that's how we get the longer pulse. So now what happens when we give this here a 1 tick pulse? You see the whole stack extends all the way, retracts all the way back up to the top. And so that there is a 6-tuple extender completely done. All we have left now is to get the item from here back into the home dropper. Now this is a bit of an involved process, I'm not going to lie, but it's just how it is. So we want this dropper to face in this direction. We're going to place a minecart in between these two blocks using the fence trick. There, and just replace this here with a piston. Under here we can have that a hopper to take the item out. Then we're going to have a dropper here because we can't have a hopper because there's a hopper underneath on top of it. And then we're going to have more like this. Hopper there. Put a block there. Then these are that's gonna be another dropper. And then we're gonna use another weird minecart trick to get the item up into this hopper. So we're gonna do the same trick as we did on that sand in there. So temporarily just remove that. Any old minecart, just stick it in there. Oops, you need to have the slab ready. So bottom slab there. And then this to get it on top. And then you want to get your soul sand. And then just push this up like so, and then you can replace everything that you just broke. Then place a dust on that hopper, dropper facing upwards, give that an update, and then you want hoppers going along here. And so we're going to have a minecart going between these two hoppers. But so that it doesn't get moved by the piston that I just broke, we're going to want to have a boat here. Okay. And then we have this with the fence, like so. And that will drop right in. And then we just push these down here. So now we can extend and retract this piston as much as we like, but it will still, when we put an item in here, although it's glitched, it will end up down in there. Okay, we're going to want some additional items in the loop. So we want one in this hopper here. We don't want one in that dropper. We want one in the minecart, and we want one in this dropper here. That's just to fill the loop, because everything's not going to make it back to the original point in one loop of the 6-tuple. So this item here, upon the 6-tuple starting, the redstone block will move, unlocking the hopper. So this item will go down into here, and basically by the end of the loop of the 6-tuple, it's going to be in the minecart. The one in the minecart is going to go down into here. This dropper, well, it will go down when this comparator turns off. This dropper gets powered quite frequently by the dust on top, but this dropper here doesn't get powered like at all. during the 6 tuple, but it will next get powered by the extra move circuit, because this line will power budding it and this piston will update it, so it will go into here. And this one here is going to, oh, this is very important, this here has to be a slab so the signal can't go downwards. This one here will first get powered by this comparator, so it'll get powered there and the item will go into this dropper, and then on the refire of the cyan circuit is going to get powered by the repeater and go into here, and this dropper is actually budded, so it's not going to go up until a bit later in the 6th tuple when it gets updated by this dust, but then it's locked in this hopper, and this hopper won't be unlocked until the next 6th tuple, meaning all the items have got back to their original positions. So now if I power the 6th tuple extender, it should do the entire thing. Okay, it's done that extra 1 tick. First extension. Then there's always a bit of a gap there, and then we get our update from the side. There's a gap because it still has to go through all of these hoppers that we needed the delay for the first time we power it, which is a bit annoying, but okay, first retraction there. Second, we get our fast extension followed by the double, and then the rest of the extension retraction happening there. And we'll see now that we have our item back in here, we have our item back in there, and one in here, which when we power the extra move circuit, which should have powered at the end, and we can tell that it did by the fact that there's the line wool in here, which means it would have gone through the hopper activating it. Shows that it works. What I'm actually going to do is just take these blocks out here, and I'm just going to power the extra moves. So let's just put 2 items in here, 1 item in there, take that item out, and just to prove that the extra move circuit works, oh, that's because this was blocked. It's a good idea to block that, because otherwise it's going to cause you a lot of problems just updating it while you build. So let's try that again. Shouldn't be anything else. Yep, and the next 6 tuple wasn't powered because I didn't put the item in, but that's probably for the best because it's going to take a while for that to finish. So that is the top circuit entirely done. So you can fill all of this in, and we can go now onto the bottom. So we're going to start with the orange circuit, which is the closing, and the people who are familiar with the other content on my channel might recognize some of this orange circuit, because it's what I use not only in the last 8x8 which I built, but also in the 7x7 I built before that, which was built all the way back in late 2015. So was the 8x8, to be honest. And so we're using that circuit once again because, quite frankly, it just works and it's really quite good. So from our dual edge here, we're going to get it. It's going to retract, giving us a 1 tick into there, powering our first blocks across. We're then going to get a repeater here, going across into 2 more repeaters. Next, what we're going to do is get a signal down here. This means this has to be a slab to let the signal go through. That's going to 1 tick these storage while this is pushing up, which will be done in a second. So this is actually working off a double extender. It first has to power a double extender, but we use a slightly weird one because we can't power the second row. We're going to do like this, and that actually happens automatically because this repeater will not only power this storage but this. So we're gonna use that to push it up, but that's a 1 tick. So to extend the pulse, we're going to get the signal over and power like so. I think it's like that. It'll be fine. So that'll make it a 2 tick, and then this is our 1 tick after that. And then to retract it, we're actually going to use part of the quad circuit. Like so, and with 3 tick going across with a sand. And then here you want, I think it's on a slab, a furnace, oops, with 28 items in it. It's 28 so that the signal doesn't go back down and power anything else. There we go. Next, what we're going to have is a little hopper circuit. So it's actually going to require us to break a couple of these things, but that's fine. First, let's put in everything that we can put in immediately. So this, 2 droppers facing upwards, going into a dropper there, like so. And that's going to go into a hopper there, and that's going to go into the minecart between these. So you're going to want a 4 tick there because you can't place that after the fact. So, oops, that'll be fine. We'll reset everything before we power the door. Fence there. We're going to want a rail, which I just got rid of. And that'll fit nicely in those blocks. Then you just want to replace everything that you broke. Remember to update that piston. And don't forget to have this slab. Nice. So then we want to power another storage. So to get that, what we're going to have is a little monostable here. Going across into this, which will power our bottom storage, which is all that we need to do there. And then to push the blocks up so they're actually in the door as the beginning of the quad extension, we're going to want a pulse going into here and into here. That's going to power our bottom part here. And then just for the sake of the dropper loop, which we placed earlier, we want to have a repeater here. This is just to send the item upwards so that it's in the correct spot. So here, if I'll just test it with 1 row just to make life a bit easier. So when we extend this, yep, it needs to push up 1 more, and the way we do that is with a dropper. So this here is going to act as the updater for this piston, so it actually retracts when we retract it, and when it retracts, that is the closing circuit. So that's going to power this dropper. Just going to go into there and get a 3-tick repeater here and a 3-tick repeater on there. So that's a locker stable that's going to create a 1-tick pulse. and that's going to make that 1 tick pulse on the closing, because this redstone block won't be here powering it, which means it can get powered from this dust. But on the opening, this redstone block is going to go here, it's going to power it, which it won't do anything just because of the time when we power it, but then it's not going to power when this dust powers it, meaning we don't get that additional 1 tick because we don't want it. What we do want on the opening though is a further extension, because we want these pistons here to go into the stack so that it can extend all the way up so the tape can power, and that's what this hopper loop's for. So you'll see that it's powered by all of this stuff happening, so it's going to go up into that dropper, and then it's basically going to power the loop again once we place our output, which is from here. So basically when so the item will go up in the opening, it's going to go up these droppers, it's going to give us an output through that comparator after some delay, and that's going to go back into this, which is going to power the storage again. But it doesn't matter that storage powers, what it's really doing is pushing these pistons across, and I forgot to turn my chat off again, and then it's going to power this one stable once again, pushing them up, ready for the door ready for the tape to go. So remember the item in that chest, I'm actually just going to turn that off now. So on our closing circuit, it's going to push all the way up, and then on our opening circuit, it's going to go all the way to there, meaning that when we want the tape to power, it's just going to go that, and it's going to push it across and up. Nice. So how are we going to power that tape? Because we actually want a really long delay before it powers at all, because we've got to wait for 2 6-tuples on the top and a third extension before we want to power that. So first we just want to get an output only on the opening so that we don't power it, we don't power the tape on the closing, because that would be quite bad. And so to do that we place that, this is just a toggle, and that's going to go across into here, which will go 3 tick, and that's so that on the opening the item will be in here, it'll get powered by the repeater, go into here. Because this is 3 tick of delay, it won't go immediately up, we have to wait for the second pulse until the item comes up, which just means we need a few fewer items in the hopper timer. Goes into that dropper, and then this dropper simply goes back into there, and that repeater as well. So the item is going to be stuck in this dropper. Now we're going to want our blue again. Get a comparator output from there, going into a hopper and a hopper, as well as this redstone block. That's so that when this powers, this one gets unpowered and this one gets powered, so all the items can swap. In here you want to place 2 stacks and 57 items. That's the amount of delay that we need. And that'll go into here, and then a torch, and then to here. And when this powers on, so all the items will come out of here, and when this powers this line on, it's going to power the dropper, which is going to unpower it, and all the items will go back. Although there's loads of items here, because then we've got to wait for a whole nother 6 tuple, then the whole opening and everything, this actually doesn't create any problems with cooldown, which is quite nice. Now we also want to have some slabs around, like so. This is so that the hoppers aren't powered, and the piston isn't budded, and the dropper doesn't get budded. We also want one here, just so the piston doesn't get powered later. Nice. Just going to pull this back. So that's going to push the items up, and now we want to actually power the piston tape. But before we can power the piston tape, we need to build the piston tape. So this side is quite easy, it's the same as before. We want to have, where's magenta? A repeater here and a comparator, which is going to lock that on. No, there's always items in this hopper, so it's always going to stay on. That's going to go down into here, pushing the block across immediately, and then across with a 2-tick to power the other one. We're also then going to have, just before I forget, a 2-tick here, which is going to be how we pull the blocks down after it's done. Now on this side, it's a bit more peculiar. This is actually what caused the door to be directional, and I'll show you why. It's really quite annoying actually. Is that right? One further back. So here and here. So we're going to get a block here. That's going to be always powered. Going down into here on subtract mode. That's going to power that piston. And then a torch here. So what this does is when a block comes into here, it's going to cut the signal off, retract the block, and then the torch is going to power the block above it, which will push this across. Like so. It's really quick. But what I didn't account for was the fact that this is obviously directional, because in the other direction, what happens when this torch turns on, rather than powering this piston, it just powers this piston again. So it just creates a loop where it goes back and forth. And this is a classic case of locationality, so the fact that I didn't notice it is a bit embarrassing, but my efforts to fix it so far haven't worked, and I can't be bothered. But then, so when it's done, a redstone block's can go here, and that's not going to get pushed across because it powers everything. So we can see the tape in action. Like so. The way we power it is by putting a redstone block next to this comparator, which turns it off. And we can see it's actually a fairly reasonably paced tape. It's not very slow at all. And we also have these here. You can, oh, that didn't work, did it? I think it's just to do with the placement, but it'll make its way all the way back to the beginning. So now we want to actually power the tape, as I said before. So we're going to have this here, which is going to get pushed across. So we do that with, oops, a sticky piston. I think it has to be sticky anyway. And a sand. The reason why we put the sand is because this will also one-tick it from here, which we don't want. And then we want to have a furnace here with an item in it. Put a repeater on 1-tick. So that's going to power when the torch comes on, but not power all the time. But you might notice that this comparator is also going to push it across, which we can't have at all. So to stop that, we get a signal out of this sand going up into a block, on the other side of which we're going to have an obsidian, meaning that it can't just push across, but it will push across when it powers correctly from the blue circuit powering. For now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this have like, I don't know, 4 items in it, and that's so that I can power it easily without having to wait a couple minutes on either side. You can see that powers the tape. And it will then stop. Or as a probably more important test, can it push the blocks up? What delay is it on? Oh, it's on 1 tick. That's my fault. So when I power this now, that's gonna push across. It's weird, it's just whenever the block's moving, that's when these sticky pistons retract, meaning that it can never pull the block down. But when the block finishes, it will pull the block down there. So that's how that works. So next, this part's always tricky, is how to detect that it's finished, so we can start the quad. So the way I do that on this one's slightly interesting. Get a dropper spacing like this. So what's going to happen while the tape is powering is the items are going to go into this dropper. The torch might push them back, but they're always going to end up in this dropper. So we're going to have 2 items in here going into a block or an output. And the way that we get the items back out again is through this torch. This torch will power off the top from the 6 tuple, and it will push the items back. And when there are no items through, that's going to power. So that's why there's a bit of a wait between the tape finishing and the quad powering. It's because we've got to wait for the cyan circuit to power twice. But it's fine. It works fine. So that's going to retract. We're going to get a signal coming into here, and also I think that goes that way up into here. So that's going to create a 1 tick. But what we remember is that this input here is connected directly to this input over here. So I don't mean that one. That would be bad. I'm just going to remove this dust. You probably should too. So this will power afterwards. So we're going to use that in the double extender because we want to retract these pistons down. So what we need to do is just power this input quickly enough so that we can take advantage of that free pulse. And we do that through here. We need a slab. Going down into another slab here, so it doesn't power the piston. It will still power this one because it's pointing directly into it, so we redirect it with a dust going down there. And then we want a slab going up, that's so that the signal can't go down again. And then we want a 2-tick repeater here, that's to extend the pulse length. So now, once again, I'm just going to make it all with 1 slice just to make everything a bit easier to see. That's going to be down there. I'm also just going to put all these in the correct position. It's going to pull that down. Now we want to pull all the pistons down here. So what we do to do that is get a redstone down here, followed by a 2-tick repeater, a 2-tick repeater, and a 2-tick repeater. That's going to pull the blocks down. Next, what we want to do is push the storage, so that's going to make it go down here. Push the storage across so that it can power those. And that we do from this little dropper thingy. So we actually want the hob facing that way. Remember to replace these. And in here, this is a right pain to place, I'm not going to lie. I'm going to do the ladder trick again, I think. Like so. And then a 4-tick in there. So an item's going to come up from here and power that. So it's going to be at this level. So now what we can do is, this is quite clever actually, is we're going to give a 2-tick into this line. So what that's first going to do is push these pistons up. So it's going to push the bottom ones up, so it's like this, and then before it will come through here and power all of this stuff. Before that happens, what we're going to do is give this a double pulse. So it's going to retract the block all the way down. So then all this stuff on the blue will power, and the pistons are going to end up like this. But then this line goes up here along and it powers this again. So it's going to go through here, pulse this, which will pull this block across, and then once again it's going to power this thing, which is going to power these bottom pistons again, retracting them all the way down. I hope that made sense. So we get that 2 tick after some delay by continuing this hopper circuit. So we want to get a hopper there. This is another annoying minecart because we're actually going to need to remove some of the stuff above it to be able to place. Should even move quite a bit. So place a rail and a fence, followed by a minecart, like so, and just let that fall down. Make sure you place the repeater first, and then you can replace everything that we just broke. I'm not even sure I can remember everything that we just broke, but that was down there. This has to be a slab, doesn't it? No, that's the solid block. The comparator on subtract mode. And remember to have your sticky piston here, no, here, and your regular piston there, and then your redstone block. I think that was everything. So that's going to go into here. This is going to put its item into this dropper, which will then get taken out by these hoppers. We're going to have another minecart here, sorry. It's going to go into there. No, I want a minecart. In here, just remove these so you can push it along. Oops. Like that. Now, because that's a sand, you're actually quite lucky in that you can just do that and it'll fall straight down. And then, you know what I forgot to do, don't you? Place the comparator. Let's do that again. Very sorry for that. No, this way. Good. And then we can replace all of that again. So just do that and you can drop it down again. So we're going to get an output coming from this hopper. This hopper is just to return it. So we're going to get the output from here. And then the way we're going to get a 2 tick, because that's a 3.5 tick pulse, we're going to shorten it by quite a cool little method that I came up with. So place a furnace here. And then so this is going to create a pulse that's going to turn off this comparator after a tick, meaning that this repeater here is locked, so it can't turn on immediately. So there's we have to wait 1 tick before it can power on, which is effectively going to shorten the pulse by 1 tick, making it a 2 tick pulse, which is correct. So then all we have left is just to return the item back into the home dropper, and so we're just going to put 2 droppers and a hopper there. So this bottom one will get powered directly by the comparator. This top one's budded by this, and so to fix that, well, to update it, we're just going to place a piston there, and that will update it once it's in its rightful place. So the items we're going to use are all non-stackable items. That's so that this comparator can reach its signal all the way across. So we're going to want one in this dropper here, one in the next dropper, one in this dropper, and one in that dropper. That's just to fill the loop up. Now all we're missing is the double pulse. Now this is actually a weird case in that from my previous experience it seems to rely on a concept that we refer to as hopper aging, which I don't know if anyone actually understands or if it's real, but basically what happens is eventually these will all just be hoppers, but to start with it doesn't work when they're all hoppers, and it needs this extra dropper. But then this version will break and we're going to need to replace that with a hopper, which is very peculiar. But we're going to get a signal up here. That's going to turn off for that, and we're going to just get under here a little torch which is going to create two little burnout pulses, which will give us two pulses into here. Block that off, doing those little retractions. So we're going to want our item in this dropper here, and now we can test our full retraction. Why didn't that work? Okay, so I went ahead and filled in the door and everything, and there were a couple of things that I found that were problems. So before you activate the door, we should just change those. So in here, this repeater should actually be on 1 tick, and both these comparators on subtract mode. In this hopper here, these should be your items, and in this hopper here, there should be 8 items rather than 10. This is because I've changed some things since I memorized the door in order to make the top a bit less locational, and that affected the bottom because they're connected. And so yes, this is the closing then. There's a couple extra pulses on the bottom, but they're fine, they don't change anything. They just make the animation a bit funny. We have to wait for this hopper to finish transferring the items before you can open the door. Here's the cooldown, which is a bit annoying, but it's not too bad. So while we're waiting for that, I'm going to go through all of the different toggles and stuff in the door, because you would have seen me not get some of these right at some points, and that's what caused most of the problems. So on the top, item in this dropper, not in this one, or this one. This is like when the door is in a open state. There should be no item in here. There should be one item in here, item in that hopper, item in this chest, nowhere else in the loop. There should be an item in this dropper, but not in this one. There should be 2 items in this dropper, no items in that dropper. This piston should be up, this piston should be up, this redstone block should be up. This dropper should have the item in it, nothing in that dropper. I think that's all the ones for the top. Yeah, and on the bottom, just make sure there are items in all of these, and that you've got your item in, well, when it's open, the item will be in the minecart chest, because the door's currently closed, it's in there, which is also correct. And also that when the door's open, the item should be there, but obviously at the moment it's there, which is also correct. So that's that. So I'm going to finish off now, and I'll leave the door opening so you can watch it in its entirety. But thank you for watching. I really hope no one builds this, because as you can see, it's a pain in the arse to build, and this video is quite long. But if you're just watching it to learn some stuff about how this door works, I hope that any of my explanations, while a bit rambly, have made some amount of sense. And now I'll let you watch the door open. One last thing, when you're making all of the when you're filling in the door frame, watch for this bud. To stop that happening, just power that piston up there, and watch for this bud. When the door's open, place a immovable object under while you fill everything in, and if it's closed, then just bud this piston and then do it, and then you can remove the bud, and that should be everything. Also note that the blocks do swap around quite a bit in the door. There's 3 states on the top, 2 states on the bottom, for a total of 6 states. So there you go. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.